Tonight, after a week of rioting, how big is the damage to England's social fabric? Will we look back on the summer of 2011 as deeply significant or a fleeting few days of madness? Gavin Esler surveyed the damage to the nation.
We live in a very different country from the one we thought we had a week ago. The institutions we took for granted, the police, the politicians, the government, reasserted themselves in the end, but they also proved we cannot always rely on them.
With us at the end of an extraordinary week, the historian David Starkey, author Owen Jones and crime writer Drida Say Mitchell. And as images of burning cities are beamed around the globe, foreign dictators are making mileage out of our misfortune. What does the rest of the world make of us now? David Tang, Tyler Brûlé and Nabila Ramdani are here. With me in the studio this time, the Chinese businessman and entrepreneur Sir David Tang, the Canadian editor-in-chief of the Foreign Affairs magazine Monocle, Tyler Brûlé, and the French journalist Nabila Ramdani. Thanks to you all for coming in. David Tang, how do you think the world is viewing us now?
The images of the rioting and the burning and all the unrest, I think, painted a very bad picture of Britain in the last few days across the world. Two things I would imagine. One, for the foreigner, and in particular, even the seasoned traveller, who used to think that London was a very safe capital, had to be amazed and possibly start thinking again whether in fact it was in fact such a safe place. And secondly, I think that dictators and the tyrants and the totalitarian states around the world must be absolutely having a distinct sense of schadenfreude, because Western democracy, which has been touted as the argument for civilization, and in the Arab Spring in particular, being peddled and promoted, is now seen to be totally vulnerable to social unrest and even more important, social injustice.
What about how China deals with dissent, though? I mean,
well,
Tiananmen is what
you saw my government there questioning whether London is able to handle the Olympics. And I've talked to a lot of Chinese. I wasn't in China at the time. I was actually in Europe. But when I talked to them, they, of course, are laughing in a way because they couldn't believe that something like this could happen. And so they are beginning to question all sorts of things in a sarcastic
Nabila Ramdani,
way.
I mean, if it wasn't so serious, it would be farcical hearing from, you know, Ahmadinejad in Iran and China's government on whether, you know, Britain's capable, London's capable, all that sort of stuff. What's the danger here?
Well, I think David Cameron's knee-jerk reaction to the riots is certainly going to attract an enormous amount of harm to Britain's international standing.
You think he's overreacted?
Oh, absolutely. The possibility to bring in the army not only upset the Metropolitan Police, but it made him sound like some kind of insensitive autocrat. And you combine this with the muted idea to curtail the use of social media such as Facebook and Twitter, and it makes him sound uncomfortably like the autocrats or the behaviour of the autocrats which provoked the Arab Spring.
Do you think there's a possibility of a massive overreaction here, more legislation? I mean, do you think anything's actually going to hit us economically? Are investors really going to pull out?
You know, there was a lot of discussions been about, of course, the poor Malaysian student, and that was certainly one of the most striking images from the week. But if I look at a second image, it's one which goes to the second biggest investors in this country, which is Japan. And we had that smouldering distribution center of Sony, but the image around the world, which was on NHK, was Oni. And I think that there will be some board meetings, end of Q3, quarter 4, where people will be thinking, what are we going to do? What will our investment strategy be in this country next year, for sure?
Especially from the point of view of the Japanese, as we saw that soon after their disaster, there was absolutely hardly any looting, and everybody was behaving.
But hang on a sec, these are the same Japanese or the same Koreans or the same Americans that have been watching our royal wedding, that have given us extraordinary
That's why they want to see something bad. Unfortunately, in the world today, when you have burning images of burning cars allowed by the police to carry on and let looters loot and so forth, unfortunately, those images are indelible. and they will be
And they're
repeated.
also risk-averse
Okay,
societies.
Nabila,
too,
you looked
as
through
well.
the Paris riots of 2005. I mean, would you say those are now indelible? People don't say, oh, my goodness, I'm not going to Paris because those riots 6 years ago.
Well, the riots certainly damaged the reputation of the city of Paris and made it appear as a very dangerous city, as a turbulent city. And I'm afraid it's the kind of thing that will happen to the reputation of the city of London. And I think, as David was saying, I think the pictures and the footage of arson was perhaps the most depressing aspect of what has been going on, because you cannot have a worse image of a nihilistic image.
I don't think it's arson, because you didn't actually see somebody torch a building, but the images of people smashing up shops and looting, and the police standing by, rightly or wrongly, that sent very bad.
It was the failure. What you're saying is that it was the
Yes.
failure of the institutions to take control, not
People
of what the
couldn't
people did.
believe that the Bobby, the great Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, Sherlock Holmes.
But isn't this a very old-fashioned idea? You know, your image
People
of
are old-fashioned. You are here in a very modern way. People outside of Britain have a very typical version, an understanding of what Britain is.
Tyler,
and for them to see that happening did, I think, irreparable damage.
Does Britain need to go on a PR offensive now? I mean, is that credible? Next year we've got the Olympics, we've got the Golden Jubilee.
No, not today. The last thing the country needs to do right now is to actually go and buy up lots of airtime on BBC World and CNN saying how great it is, even though there's a bit of that going on anyway. I think what needs to happen is people need to see a plan. If you look at, I think, an international investor community, I think they want to know what's going to happen with youth unemployment at 20%. If I'm going to invest in this country, I'm going to set up a semiconductor plant, I want to make sure there's a trained workforce here. And I think you only have to look at this country versus Germany. I think business, our peers, want to see a plan. We haven't heard that this week.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.